On today's show, I sit down with Danny Sheaffer, and we are talking catching and his 8 major areas of focus.
Welcome to another episode of the Baseball Awakening Podcast, where we dive into the raw, unfiltered, unsexy side of player development. Get ready for some knowledge bombs with your host, Geoff Rottmayer.
Welcome to the Baseball Awakening Podcast. I'm Geoff Rottmayer. Today, I'm sitting down with Danny Sheaffer. Danny began his career with the Boston Red Sox after being selected in the first round of the 1981 Major League Baseball draft. During his 18-year playing career, he spent 8 seasons in the Major League with the Red Sox, Indians, Rockies, and the Cardinals. Since then, he has spent the last 19 years as a manager or a catching coordinator in the Cardinals, Astros, and Rays organization. Danny has managed every level of the minor league baseball and created a developmental catching program for the St. Louis Cardinals and the Houston Astros. During his years in player development, he has won many awards in each of the organizations that he's been a part of. Very excited to have him here. Danny, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Geoff.
Awesome. Well, look, I really appreciate you coming on. So, Danny, sir, you have spent 18 years in professional baseball, 8 of which you spent in the big leagues. So, and I want to talk today about catching, but can you kind of take us through your playing career and some of the things that you've learned along the way that has helped you do what you're doing now, and that's coaching catchers?
Well, I started out, obviously I'm not going to go through the little league and all that stuff, but I actually took it as a dare from a kid on the playground and went home and told my dad I wanted to play ball. And he said, go in the backyard and play with your brothers. And I said, no, I want to play real baseball. So he took me down and signed me up for $5. And a couple of kids got hurt at the first practice. I didn't even own a glove, and they put me behind the plate. And next thing I know, 2 years later, we're playing for a berth in the Little League World Series, and moved on to Clemson University. Played there for a season under Coach Bill Wilhelm, and personality conflicts back then. We were all young and dumb at one time, and I ended up getting ready to move on to Oklahoma State. But before I did, I sat out for about a year and ended up being a first-round draft pick with the Boston Red Sox, and that started an 18-year playing career, which is at this year's spring training will be year number 40.
Nice. So you are a catching guy. So let's talk some catching. It seems like whenever I talk to catchers, they seem to be a different breed. These guys have so much fun and so much passion for the catcher position. What is it about this position that makes it so fun?
Well, that's all I ever did until I got to the big leagues. When I got to the big leagues, I ended up moving around the field a little bit, but primarily 14, 15, 1,600 games behind the plate. It becomes an obsession because you're involved in every play. It becomes one position that you can take ownership of, that when you win, you really, really, really feel like you had a part of it. But unfortunately, when you lose, you feel like you were all the responsibility. That's why you lost it. And so I kind of like the feast or famine mode. And you're correct. Guys that are behind the plate, not just for a year or two, but for decades, they're a breed apart, and they're a lot of fun to be around and talk to.
Yeah, what would be something in regard to catching? What would be something that seems to be misunderstood?
Well, again, it depends on who you talk to, but with the analytical changes in the game and with all of that, I would have to say that I think the general public really thinks, and actually some coaches really think this as well, that we can actually make a ball a strike. And although it may seem like that at times from StatCast and looking on television, but when you get with really good umpires, these guys are really, really good, and they're not fooled. We kind of take pride into stealing pitches and to manipulating the game and all of that. But when you really look at the game from reverse and you look at it from the standpoint, the game's over, go back and replay it, these umpires don't miss too many pitches. And I think we take more balls out of the strike zone than we actually bring back into the strike zone.
Interesting. You have a website called firmfoundationcatching.com.
Mm-hmm.
And you elaborate on 8 major focus. And I'm not sure if you listed those by priority, but the first one you have on there is receiving. So what is it about receiving that we must understand, and why is it important for catchers to really understand this?
Well, first I'd like to say why I did the DVD. It's a digital download or a regular hard copy. I did that because I got really frustrated in the game from not just at the pro level, but at the amateur level too. Just a misunderstood responsibilities of a catcher and actually teaching the skill. My responsibility in professional baseball for years has been to develop major league catchers, and having seen the demise of the receiver over the years, I decided to put the actual program that I wrote for the Houston Astros and I wrote for the St. Louis Cardinals in digital form, so everybody could see it. And when I did that, I prioritized what I feel are the highlights of the position, and obviously number one was receiving, and that leads to your question. I mean, look, if we're catching any game, whether it's a 7-inning amateur game or whether it's a 9-inning professional game, you're looking at well over 100 pitches, and each one of those pitches have to be received or attempted to be received. And so to work on any other skill as a priority is really, really missing the boat.
Yeah, I agree. So what about mindset? Mindset, everything in this game. So what is the mindset that one must have about receiving?
Well, obviously, if we call a game and there's 125 pitches, we have to catch 125 pitches. The mindset has to be that you're going to catch every pitch, that you're going to present every pitch as a strike, potentially block every pitch that has the potential for being in the dirt, and go from there.
Nice. You elaborate on this a little bit when we were discussing the misunderstood aspect of catching. Dale Scott, I had Dale Scott on the show. He's a former MLB umpire, and I had him on the show, and he talked about how the whole framing the ball was actually kind of hurting guys more than it was helping. So when it comes to this framing concept, what would be a rule of thumb, or is there one?
Yeah, I mean, Dale's right. It has hurt. It has hurt this game more than it has helped this game, really. And I've talked to a lot of major league umpires too, and their mindset is this: they're going to make up their mind as the pitch is crossing home plate or even before. And so the ability of the catcher to change their mind, I think it shows the inability of an umpire to really hone on his skill. And when we think that we can take the ball 4 inches off the plate or 3 inches down and manipulate an umpire, then we're not really giving credit to that guy behind the plate. And quite frankly, I don't think any catcher would want that pitch called on him. So we're at a turning point in the game where receiving is being abused, I believe, by gurus and gadgets and gimmicks and things like that, where eventually this game is a cyclical game. It will come back in circle. It may not come back to where it used to be, but it's going to be the guys that have the softest and quietest hands that are going to be able to excel in this game. Okay,
that was going to bring me to my next question was, what was the alternative? And you said, the soft hands, So, for the people that are listening, can you kind of explain that a little bit more, the soft hands?
Yeah. Look, most of the movement on the pitches are within the last 10 to 8 feet of home plate. And so if your hands are prepared for that movement, and not preset, or you don't get your hands or arm extended that much, and you're able to receive the ball as if, I use the term an egg or a water balloon or something like that, that if you grab something, or if you snatch at it, or if you stick it, those things are going to break. And so the baseball is no different. There are certain pitches that you need to get to and get to extension, but not most of them. And so when you're playing catch and the ball's coming at you anywhere from 80 to 95 miles an hour or even faster, if we add to that velocity by pushing the ball instead of letting it come to us, then we're creating an environment that's not going to work very well.
Nice. So it's just like everything else, let the ball come to you.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say a pitch like a slider, a pitch that breaks a lot. What's the process there?
Well, I think it has a whole lot to do with who's on the mound and the situation. I think it has to do a lot with the count. I think it has to do a lot with the conditions of the field. And there's so many things that go into it, and we'll talk about that in game management later. But I really believe that if we know the ability of our pitcher and we know what he's capable of doing, that's how we set up. We can't expect a guy if he's got a pitch that he's 50% on as far as execution, and we're sitting on the outside 1.5 inches or 2 inches of the plate, we're asking for trouble.
Interesting. So I want to get into the game management part, but one last thing about receiving before we do. What are your thoughts on the robo umpires, and what will that do to the art of receiving? What impact will it have?
I think the guys that have the softest and quietest hands are going to come back to the forefront. I really do. I think if you can watch Twitter all day long and you can see crazy stuff behind the plate, and to me it's snake oil. It's not going to last. And when we go to robo umps, which we may, because they're already at that in the Arizona Fall League, and independent ball has already seen it. I'm not sure I'm a big fan. I love the human element of the game, but also I like the fact that those that are trying to manipulate the game behind the plate, their actual skill set will diminish as the game comes back into full circle when a strike is a strike. And I really don't think anybody wants the plate to be wider than 17 inches. I mean, think of any other sport. Do we ever want the basketball rim to be bigger? Do we ever want the goalpost to be bigger or something like that, or the hockey goal? I mean, this game's based on some things that are unchanging. And so, yes, we have the human element, but, the human element can change. I mean, an umpire will know if he misses a pitch, and believe it or not, whether they want to admit it or not, they're going to try to make that up later on in a situation that's not that critical. But we like the human element, because that whole relationship with the umpire, I would much rather be behind the plate with Roger Clemens on the mound, or Lee Smith on the mound, or Dennis Eckersley on the mound, than a rookie out there on the mound with better stuff, because Clemens is going to get the strike, and so is Eckersley, because they're respected by the umpire. Where you run into problems is where you got Eckersley or Clemens on the mound, and you have Tony Gwynn or Ken Griffey Jr. at the plate. Then what do? It becomes fun.
Yeah, you touched on the game management, and that's really the second thing of your 8 major focus that's on the Firm Foundation Catching.com. What is game management? Well,
I mean, there's a giant umbrella there. I had this question asked by a major league general manager one time, and I think my answer actually was very satisfactory to him. But it encompasses all of pitch calling, the umpire-catcher relationship, the manager-catcher relationship, the pitcher-catcher relationship, how you control the tempo of the game, your leadership abilities, your accountability behind the plate, preparation. All of that stuff. And ultimately to reach your final goal of managing the game correctly, you're shaking hands with the winning pitcher at the end of the game.
Nice. Let's get into the pitch calling. This is an area that coaches, especially at the younger level, this is an area that has been turned over to the coaches, and the kids are not really learning. So, what is pitch calling, and how does one kind of, start developing and start processing this skill?
Well, in a nutshell, if I'm just looking at a garden variety answer, and we can go into detail if you'd like, but when calling any certain pitch, there's basically 4 criteria that need to be met. Some are real simple, but really the number one thing is the ability or inability of the pitcher to locate that pitch. And quite simply, if a guy can't hit a slider at the plate and the pitcher can't throw a slider for a strike or anywhere close to the strike zone, we can that. That's not any good. But if the pitcher's ability is to be able to locate pitch A, then that's the one you call. And but there are some things that go into that, and I think one of the last things to be considered is the hitter at the plate, unless his name is Barry Bonds. But when you look at a pitcher's ability to throw a strike, that's the one you call. You got to look at the scoreboard. I mean, if the score's 7-0 in the 8th inning, I wouldn't mess around with the pitcher's 3rd or 4th best pitch in any situation. I'd go right at the hitter. The count plays in big time when you're calling a ball game. I think the catcher really needs to know what the statistics are throughout baseball in certain counts, because it really does matter. For example, if the count's 0-2 or 1-2 on any given hitter, the major league batting average is somewhere around 160 and maybe a little bit less now, but especially with all the strikeouts. But if the count's 2-0 or 3-1, the major league batting average is 350 or 360. I mean, quite frankly, that's because they know what's coming, and so you really got to dictate, what the count is behind the plate in your pitch calling, because when you get to a 1-1 count, throwing a ball on that count versus throwing a strike on that count, and that's clearly done by the pitcher's ability or inability to throw the strike, the batting average changes 170 points from a 2-1 to a 1-2.
Yeah.
So you got to throw a strike. And so then you look at the conditions, the situation, the wind. I mean, if you're in Wrigley and the wind's blowing in, throw the ball down the middle. They're not going to hit it out. Yeah. But if you're in Coors Field and the wind's blowing out, better keep the ball down. And so just situations like that. Also with a man on second base and nobody out. I know the shifts come into play now, but the hitter's trying to get the runner over. And if a right-hander gets a pitch out over the plate, you're giving it to him. You got to make sure you pound him in or keep it down so he can try to pull the ball. But those are the criteria that go into pitch calling.
Nice. So a lot of paying attention and understanding. So what would a pre-game conversation between a pitcher and a catcher? What would a pre-game conversation? What gets discussed during this time?
Well, I'll just tell you how it's been done in the past. I think I had some of the best with Dave Duncan in St. Louis and Tony La Russa, who was the most prepared manager I've ever played for in my life. We made sure that we picked out a guy or two in the lineup that we did not want to beat us that night. And so, and usually in the big leagues, everybody can beat you, but right. In general, there's 2 or 3 guys that you don't want to beat you. I mean, when you're facing the Astros now, good luck, but yeah. Or the Nationals, but usually you just make sure that you don't pitch around those guys. You just make sure that you don't give in to those guys. And there's the aspect of turning the ball over to the bullpen, and who's going to match up with who, what left-hander is going to match up with this left-hander, and vice versa. But it's really a blueprint on how to succeed that day, with a couple of amendments. If this happens, we do this. If this happens, we do that, to where there's never a situation you're on the field and you don't know what to do.
Yeah. What about in today's game with all the analytics and the numbers? Does that stuff help, or is that just stuff?
No, it does help, and anybody that says it doesn't, being really hard-headed and all of that. Look, everything has changed.
Right.
This game has changed big time, and more information is better, but it's also not the end all. And so when it can be combined with the human element and with the knowledge of the past, I think it's a win-win situation. But I think if you take it as an either or instead of a both and, you're in trouble.
Yeah, you had mentioned leadership quality for catchers, which is super important. Can you talk a little bit about why it's important for catcher to take that leadership role?
Well, someone needs to be accountable. Someone needs to wear it when it goes bad, and someone needs to give credit to someone else when it goes good. So, I mean, a catcher that is quick to point blame will have a very short career and is not going to be well liked at all. A catcher that's willing to take responsibility, a catcher that's more than willing to go the extra mile, to put the work in, to encourage his teammates, to edify his teammates, and so forth, and to be able to take the blame when it's not his fault. Is really, really important, because that's where the buck really stops.
Yeah.
It's for example, coming back to the dugout and a pitch gets hit in the gap and 2 runs score, and why did you call that pitch? Well, because the pitcher shook me off. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so be able to just take ownership.
So does I talked to a couple pitchers, and they said if they're on the same page as the catcher, then essentially the catcher knows what they want to throw, but the pitcher is in complete control of the pitch calling. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. Now it changes a little bit with all the analytics that we know and the shifts and all of that stuff, but in general, that if the buck stops on the mound, obviously the catcher can read swings, the pitcher can read swings, and all of that stuff. So we may change midstream based on something we're seeing that day that really isn't in the notes, but just kind of a gut feel. But yeah, I mean, you're always going to find catchers and pitchers, especially pitchers that say, yeah, we were on the same page, everything was clicking. Yeah. You never hear that when they lose.
Right.
Only when they win. And so, that's why this game's so wonderful. It's the human element is huge, and you can do everything right and still get pounded.
Yeah.
Or you can you can throw a hanging breaking ball and pop it up. So it's a cool game.
Yeah, so that brings me to that catcher-pitcher relationship. How important is that for a catcher to take that extra step? Maybe they don't like the guy, but they got to work together to get guys out. So how important is that relationship?
Well, the team is obviously more important than the self, and I can be honest with you. I caught guys that I'd take a bullet for, and I caught guys that I wouldn't throw a bucket of water on if they're on fire. Right. But having said that, for that 2 to 3 hour period, we are on the same team, and we're going to do whatever it takes to shake hands at the end of the game.
Yeah.
Most players, not only in amateur ball but in professional ball, willing to do anything and everything they can to help that pitcher out, because this guy's on an island literally by himself, and he gets the W and the L behind his name, or the save, and so they're all temperament. They're all very, very fragile on the mound. It doesn't matter how tough they look. Everybody's watching them. They're the ones with the ball. And, I think when Tom Brady goes back for a pass, nobody looks at the guard. They're always looking at him. And so it's the same way on the mound. And so we need to understand that we're out there every day. These guys are out there every 5 days, and they have to live with success or failure for 4 out of those 5 until they get a chance to redeem themselves or prove themselves again. So it's really, really important for them to know that we have their back.
We talked a little bit about the preparation part. The whole having the game plan and looking at, whatever information you have that's available, the numbers, the analytics, whatever, all the stuff you have. What are some of the other preparations? What are the preparation routine looks like for a catcher?
Well, we're really routine oriented. Every day is Groundhog Day for us. Obviously, we have to do work in the bullpen before the game and catch sides and do all of that stuff. And but as far as just normal preparation for a catcher, it doesn't change from shortstops to catcher. It's all the same. Right. But catcher goes through his daily routine in the bullpen. A lot of it, quite frankly, is eyewash. Because you can't practice this game at game speed, but you need to do some kind of reps to keep your mind going and keep your body going. And it's a really difficult position to practice because you never, ever, ever do it at game speed. Yeah. So you've got to figure out a way to speed yourself up in drills so you can actually have some quick-fired muscle memory and all of that. So it's a tough question to answer, and in general, it's just really hard to prepare for game speed.
Yeah. So what about when you got a guy, when you were, let's go back when you were in the player developer in the minor league, you get a young kid and he's still trying to figure out, who he is and whether he belongs, and he needs to come up with a routine. And everyone's routine is different. So how do you help a guy develop a routine? Do you make suggestions, or how does that work?
Well, guys that don't have one or know what it is, they're easy. But guys that like to do what they like to do, it pays dividends to listen to them and to let them do what they think they need to do to prepare, but also make slight suggestions one at a time, to where after 6 or 8 weeks, the routine looks more defined and refined the way we want it instead of the way they want it, but they don't even know it happened. Yeah. We keep some of their ideas and so forth. And, to have a my way or the highway mentality or one shoe fits all is really not helpful at all. So you look at the need and just encourage them. And some of the stuff they do is not helpful at all, but they think it is. Yeah. So if they think it's helpful, I'm not going to take it from them.
Yeah. So can you give an example of that? Like what would be something that may be a waste of time, but they think it's helpful?
Well, I look at a lot of robotic drills that don't transition into games, and that can be done with anything, hitting, fielding, it doesn't matter. The stuff out there that just is so regimented, the throwing programs, catchers catching with I don't know, real small gloves or something like that. Yeah. And although that has some benefit to it, look, I've never seen any other sport, and I'm not old school. I'm a realist. Yeah. Okay. You look at bowling. I mean, the guys that are going out there and bowling, the professional bowlers, say they have a 15-pound ball with their finger holes in it that they play with and they compete with. They're not going to go out with a 6-pound ball that don't fit their hand and practice. Right. And so I think that anything that we do in this game that creates muscle memory that doesn't transition into the game is a deterrent for the athlete.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of crazy stuff out there. So, but yeah. So we're talking a little bit about game management, and I would love to talk more about this, and maybe I can get you on again and we can go in a little more in depth. But just to kind of get into some other topics, the next thing that you have listed on your website, it's going to be blocking. So what is blocking, and what is misunderstood about it?
Well, probably going to get disagreements on this, but look, I think if we block a fastball, it's more luck than anything else. And I mean, you got 0.4 of a second when it releases his hand till it hits home plate.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be some kind of athlete, you know, to be on time and to look good blocking fastballs. Now, I'm not saying you don't have to block fastballs. I'm not saying that. But I think that technique is one thing. I think its technique is geared toward to the player. I think it all changes sometimes. Some guys are really good kickback guys like Mike Matheny was. Some guys are really good straight down guys like Yachty is, and sometimes even on one knee. But I'm not a big fan of that. But that happens. But ultimately, the what you got to do is keep the guy from advancing 90 feet or advancing from home to first on strike 3. So how it's done is relative to who's doing it. There's no one way to build this mousetrap. But what you have to do, doesn't matter what level, doesn't matter who you are, you have to be prepared and anticipate the ball in the dirt. If you don't anticipate it, you're going to be late. That's obvious.
Yeah.
But the other word that plays into it is if you don't anticipate it, you're lazy, and we can't fix that.
Right. So what about different pitches with different spin?
Mm-hmm.
What's understood about that?
Yeah, well, yeah, you know, I listen to a lot of people who talk catching and talk about a breaking ball when it hits, it bounces back the other way. I've never caught a pitch that bounced the other way. I've caught it's coming in from right to left like a right-handed breaking ball, and it'll hit. It might straighten up a little bit, but it's not going to bounce the other way. You know, the person with that kind of curveball doesn't really exist anymore. Right. You know, yeah, you really gotta know. Obviously different textures, different weather, different, you know, mud, all of that kind of stuff comes into play. Yeah. But, you know, if a ball bounces 4 feet in front of a catcher, you know, it's an act of God if you're going to block it or not. It's almost impossible. But most of these pitches, as you get to a higher level, you know, we know when they're going to be in the dirt. Yeah. You know, we actually, you know, engineer that pitch to be in the dirt. You know, we know if it. Yeah. So preparation is key.
Yeah. So you've mentioned weather a couple of times, and you know weather can affect a pitch baseball. So can you talk a little bit about the weather factors that catchers need to be aware of in terms of how the ball moves and stuff?
No, yeah, big time. I mean, first of all, if you got a guy with a good changeup or if you got a guy with a good breaking ball, there's a couple things. You got gravity that comes into effect. You got drag, but now you got wind facing you. So if the wind's blowing in a pitcher's face, that breaking ball is going to snap a whole lot more, and it's not going to be easy to control. The changeup's going to act like it hits a wall. It's going to have the force of the wind going against it. And vice versa, the altitude in Coors Field and also actually in Atlanta, which is the second highest elevated ballpark in the nation, in the big leagues. You know, the weather is going to really dictate how the ball breaks. Yeah. And you're not going to see a bunch of free agent pitchers signed to go to the Colorado Rockies, that's for sure. Right. But you know, with the wind blowing in, you know, and like I said, like you used to in Candlestick or even in Wrigley, now it really determines how you call a game. But you know, there's a lot of foul territory in Oakland. You know, I challenge hitters big time there because of how much foul territory there is, as opposed to Wrigley Field, that you can shake the hand of the guy in the first row.
Yeah, so with that, what would be a pitcher and a catcher? What would be the dream weather?
From a catcher standpoint, nighttime in the middle of the summer in Dodger Stadium, the ball dies, doesn't go anywhere. Yeah, but as a hitter, you don't want to hit there. But I mean, I would just like a humid, hot day where it takes pretty much the weather out of it, where you got to hit it to go, and you know, I like the tall grass that Wrigley used to have, where ground balls could get eaten up. Not a big fan of AstroTurf, but I know it's out there.
Yeah, so for the people that are listening, you can start to see all the examples of things that they've got to pay attention to, to use to their advantage to get guys out. So it's pretty cool stuff when you start to look at the details. All right, Danny, let's jump to feet work and throwing. That is another aspect that you have on your website. So can you talk a little bit about that? Well, let's start with the footwork.
Yeah. Well, again, there's a garden variety way of looking at it. Some guys just pivot on their right foot and throw, like Girardi used to. There's some guys that actually gain a little bit of ground, but with the right foot. But in general, when you're looking at footwork and exchanges, our goal is to get the ball airborne as quick as possible. And what that means is by the time it hits your glove until the time it leaves your right finger, to me, that is the critical part of exchanges. And that can all be manipulated by understanding that the quicker you get your right foot down, the quicker you get the ball airborne. And we're looking at a half a tenth a second. I mean, we're trying to manipulate guys that are 0.65 in their exchanges to get them to be a 0.58 or a 0.55. Some of the better ones in the major leagues are right at 0.50, and some of the slower ones are 0.70. And when you look at the end of adding a 0.2 of a second onto your exchange time, that's the difference between 1.9 and 2.10.
Yeah.
And so, we got to get the ball airborne. We all can throw. All catchers can throw. I mean, I'm not talking about your 12-year-old little leaguer who's just getting onto the big field that has to have the rainbow to get to second base. I'm talking about when guys get their man bodies and they start to grow up. We all can throw. And there's some out there that are better than others.
Yeah.
But there's very, very few that are throwing like I'm seeing on Twitter. That person doesn't exist.
Right. The guy that jumped halfway over the plate.
Yeah. That's not good. I mean, if I was trying to make a club now or doing a showcase, I could cheat behind the plate where I don't think the guy running the watch would even understand. But they're looking at the pitcher throwing the ball. They're clicking the watch when it hits their glove, and they're stopping the watch when it hits second base. And they're not really worried about, how you're cheating behind the plate, the ground you're gaining that you can't do in a game, and all of that stuff. But throwing is real important. But it's a small aspect of the game. Yeah, I think it takes on too much importance because we only throw 2 to 3 times a game max.
Yeah.
And your average thrower in the major leagues throws out about 30% of his runners. And so you fail 70% of the time. Stolen bases have been way down as far as the attempts because everybody's trying to hit the ball in the air and hit the ball at the ballpark. And Vince Coleman doesn't exist anymore, and Ricky Henderson's not running anymore. So it's a small part of the game, but it's what attracts people. So as far as scouts and coaches, they want to know what your pop time is. I really don't care.
Yeah.
We all can throw. I just want how quickly you get rid of the ball.
Yeah. So with the feet work, you start mentioning those times, the 0.58, the 0.55, 0.50, that can make up for the guy who doesn't have the strongest arm. And that's where it becomes more important, right?
Yeah. And you're talking to one too. I had average arm strength. But I understood that from finally when I got to the major leagues and talked to somebody that knew a little bit more than I did, I understood that I'm in control of the ball by the time it hits my glove until the time it leaves my fingers. And if I can quicken that up because I'm in control of that, then the end result's going to be better. I really don't care how hard somebody throws or how good their arm is. I hear this all the time, that this guy is a catch and throw guy. He's a catch and throw guy. Well, he still throws out 30% of his runners. And so what makes him such a catch and throw guy? That's just a term for he can't hit. But I mean, I'm more of a realist when it comes to throwing, because if the pitcher does his job and delivers the ball to home plate at 1.3 or under, they're not running anyway.
So what are your thoughts on the velocity program for catchers?
I think anytime you increase velocity, it's a good thing. I also think when you try to increase velocity, you slow down tempo, you slow down exchanges. And I'd much rather work on quick feet and a quick exchange than all we are is behind the plate. Is we're second basemen or shortstops turning a double play. They don't care about the velocity. They care about getting rid of the ball at second base. And so we're trying to get rid of the ball behind the plate.
So for the people that are listening that maybe have a young son that catches, and he's on social media and he's saying, gee, the only thing we focus on, it seems to be the pop time. And so what you're saying is that's going to come with the feet work and that stuff.
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, I would encourage the guy, when you're in Rome, do what the Romans do. I mean, I would encourage him to really work on his exchanges in pop time to please the masses. But when I'm doing my individual work and I'm really honing in on what's important, I'm really nailing receiving and game management.
Awesome. So the next thing that you have listed is the plays at the plate.
Mm-hmm.
What is that, and why is it important to understand how to handle plays at the plate?
Things have changed big time since the Buster Posey rule came in effect, and I'm not. Look, I wasn't on the other end of that with Posey. I was on the other end before when Willie McGee ran me over and Dante Bichette and Bo Jackson and people like that. But the rules have changed. And so to answer your question is, we got to make sure of two or three things. We got to make sure we catch the ball. You can't tag a guy until you catch the ball. We become infielders at the plate, so you got to work from the bottom up. I'm a big fan of leaving the mask off. Take it off at the place of the plate. Now, younger levels, leave it on. The dental bills get expensive.
Yeah.
But I can see a whole lot better on a low pitch or a one hopper with the ball in the dirt with the mask off than I can on. I would make sure that I give the runner part of the plate to slide at, and when I get the ball, I take it away from him. I would use my gear as a weapon, and understand that the guards hurt to slide into. I would not shy away from that. I would also understand that the scoreboard. I would know beforehand, and I encourage every catcher to know this beforehand, how important that run is. If that run's not going to beat you or tie you, and you have an opportunity to make a play where you go get the ball, if it's a bang bang play at the plate and you're not sure you're going to get him and the run can't beat you, to stop the batter runner or someone else on the bases from advancing another 90 feet. So you got to be aware of that situation too. But very few runners now, I would say no runners now try to run over catchers.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen. And if it does, boy, they're chastised in a hurry, the way the rules have changed.
Yeah.
So the fear of being run over at the plate is non-existent. We've politically corrected this position to where it's almost like flag football.
So with the play at the plate, let's say we got a throw coming from the outfield. Would you guys rather have a long hop or a throw that goes all the way through?
If there's not a batter runner, like a sacrifice fly or a guy going from first to third potentially, I want the ball in the air, or I want the ball in a one hop. If the batter runner has a chance to advance, I want the ball in the air so I can make the determination to go get it or not.
Okay, so let's jump over to fielding bunts. This is where, like you mentioned, this is where you become almost an infielder because of the different angles you got to throw and the different feet work. So let's just start with what's misunderstood about fielding bunts.
Well, I don't know if it's misunderstood, but I think you have to again, the scoreboard and the situation comes into play. You got to know the speed of the runner. That's the first thing. And the speed of the runner dictates, if you go ahead and clear yourself a lane to where you don't throw the ball into his back. If you circle the ball down a third baseline from right to left, or if you go from left to right. But probably the most important thing to do on fielding a bunt is making sure your footwork is set prior to releasing the ball. The last thing you want to do is throw a ball down the right field line and create something that is unstoppable. But I think this is a skill that's not practiced at all. And because the art of the bunt is slowly becoming extinct before it gets resurrected again. But I would really recommend catchers to field with two hands, to use the glove as a dustpan and the hand as a broom, to try to make sure you gather the ball instead of getting it with one hand. The right hand, if you have to get it with the right hand, that tells me that the runner's really fast and it's going to be a bang bang play. Never ever ever grab the ball just with your glove.
What about arm slot? Do you recommend guys practicing the different throws and the different arm slots?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. I would practice throwing from down under. I would practice setting my feet and making a routine throw. I would practice sliding and getting a bunt and practicing. And I would think that anything that could happen in a game situation needs to be practiced from any position at any level.
Yeah, so if I'm listening to this and I have no idea how hard this position is, how maybe tell us, how hard is this position and the amount of work that goes into being good at it?
We only get noticed when we mess up. You can catch 100 pitches and block 15 a game, which is a lot. And if you miss one ball and a guy advances 90 feet, there goes the finger pointing. I understand that there's accountability for other positions as well. But when a catcher has a pass ball or a wild pitch doesn't get blocked and a guy goes 90 feet, that sticks out. And so it's a position to where you can do everything right and no one notices. But you do one thing wrong and everybody notices. You do everything right at shortstop. You do everything right at third. He made some nice plays at third, or nice, even good range at shortstop. Everybody, that's fine. But catcher blocks the ball, and it's like, well, he's supposed to do that. And so it's a thankless position, but it's a lot of fun.
So talk about the mental part of that, the emotional part. I sat there, I made a play, or more like I didn't make a play, and everybody noticed it. So what's the conversation like to get a guy to get back to being present and just letting that go?
Well, not only catching, but baseball in general, but especially catching. This is a game where you have to have an extremely short memory. You can't focus 1 second on what happened 1 second earlier. You can't change it. You really can't look down the line saying, I'm setting up this guy for this pitch later on, or I'm looking 2 innings ahead that we might face this guy later. This is a position where it's here and now.
Yeah.
Because if you let the here and now slip, the future changes big time.
Yeah.
And so you have to make sure that everything, 100% of your energy is on the task at hand. And when that task fails or succeeds, it's over. And then you move on to what's next. And so short memory, real short memory. Yeah. But also a memory that you're able to learn from your mistakes. And there's no playbook for this stuff.
Yeah.
It's just so hard to do this, but again, the risk versus reward's great.
Yeah. Have you had a catcher in the minor league, a guy who's just trying to figure things out, and he just could not get over a play. You know, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you heard the analogy, the red light, yellow light, green light concept. But green light meaning everything's going good. Yellow, the game's speeding up, and then red light, you just kind of checked out. So, have you ever had a guy just get so pissed off on a play that he checks out? And what does that do for the rest of the game?
I've had hundreds. The ones that I haven't had like that are the ones that eventually made it to the major leagues. Now, there are some that make it to the major leagues that can't control, you know, a runaway truck. But their ability is so great that they actually make it. But for the most part, the player that's mentally tough, that has major league talent, is the one that excels. Now, that's easy to say, but there's a bunch of players that have the talent that never get there because they're mentally weak.
The last part you have is pop-ups. Can you talk about that a little bit? You know, it's a much tougher play than it looks. So can you explain why it's so tough?
Sure. You know, it's a boring play. I mean, nobody practices it. It's fun to practice it once in a while, but you rarely see a major leaguer drop a pop-up. You will once in a while, but, you know, there are certain things that go into play. Obviously, the weather conditions big time. Again, the sun comes into play, the wind, the foul territory comes into play, but most importantly, the understanding of priorities when it comes to pop-ups. You know, it's really universal throughout baseball. It doesn't matter what level you play at. The catcher, you know, he's going to get the balls behind the home plate, but, you know, the third baseman has priority over the catcher. The first baseman has priority over the catcher. So if they call you off, let them have it. Our mitts are designed not to catch balls like that above our heads, but we do it. And if you just understand who's got priority along with what the conditions are, then that's going to make it a lot easier. I mean, if all down the dugouts come into play, the on deck circle comes into play. If if a ball's hit between home and third over by the dugout and the catcher calls it and he's camped underneath it, third baseman's going to let him have it. But if the catcher's drifting, it's the third baseman's ball. I mean, you got to understand that people have priority over you. And the other thing that comes into play, and it's at any level, is, you know, it's universal. The ball, when it's hit, because of the spin of the ball, is going to drift back toward the infield. So you want to make sure that you turn your back to the infield if you can. Make sure the ball's coming down in front of you and not right at your head. If it's coming down right at your head and it's 40 feet in the air, you're going to miss it. Yeah. That's about it. Those are easy plays. Those are plays that are fun to practice, but they need to be taken seriously.
Okay, cool. So Danny, you know, again, I really appreciate this conversation, and I've got a couple more questions that I'd like to end up on. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about a common myth about catching that you can or want to debunk.
Well, that's a really tough one because, you know, the changes evolve in this game, but I believe that, and I said it earlier, I give umpires credit. I don't think that we can even, I'm going to be disagreed on by a ton of people here, and that's okay. I'll stick to my guns on this because I believe that most people think that by having such a manipulation behind the plate and being able to present balls in such a special way, I'm being a little sarcastic, that you can actually fool an umpire. I don't believe that. I think you can fool a bad one. I don't think you can fool a good one. I think they're really, really good. And if anybody really wants to be honest with themselves when they're watching baseball games, and a catcher moves a ball 3 or 4 inches or 5 or 6 inches, and the announcers are talking how good he framed that ball or how good he presented that ball, if they look and see where the ball hit on StatCast, it's a strike anyway. He's just moving it 4 inches closer to the plate. And so, you know, I think at the younger level, maybe at the minor league level, I think you can manipulate the game a little bit. Once you get to the elite levels, I think the myth that you can actually make a ball a strike is I think that's can be debunked. I don't believe that.
Yeah, when I talked to Dale Scott, I learned a lot, and I really got a different perspective on the umpire viewpoint and stuff. So it was interesting listening, and so yeah, I agree with you. So, what advice do you have for a young catcher that is listening? Maybe even a young coach or dad that wants to be a good catcher or a good catching coach.
I would really place it, and I'm repeating myself again, I would really place the importance on the priority of the skill needed. I don't think you can spend too much time receiving to try to identify how soft your hands can be and limit pre-pitch movement and catching every pitch. I would spend the time where it's needed. I wouldn't spend a ton of time on blocking, on pop-ups, on fouls, on foul balls. I would really focus on receiving. You can be really good at every other skill, but if you can't catch the ball, you're going to play first base or third, or left field. I would really focus on balls thrown from the pitcher.
Nice. And what about some of the best resources that you've encountered that kind of helped you along the way?
I'm a little different than guys now because I'm a little older, but we didn't have the internet. We didn't have social media, thank goodness, and all of that. I learned a long time ago, no matter what I want to do in life, that if I find somebody that succeeded at it, I would pick their brain until they were tired of talking to me. And it doesn't matter what position. I mean, if I want to be a financial advisor, I'm going to go find somebody that works with Edward Jones that have had success and figure out how he did it and try to emulate it. If I want to build a house, I'm going to go find a guy that built $1 million houses and figure out how to do it. I just like a baseball player. I sat under people coming through the minor leagues that have succeeded at the highest level. And I sat there and listened to them and talked to them. And some of the greatest conversations I've ever had were with Johnny Pesky, Bob Gibson, Lou Brock, Red Schoendienst, Bob Feller, and guys like that, George Kissel, and just sat there and listened and soaked it all in and kind of put my own twist on things. But if I was a young player right now, I would really stay clear of gadgets, gimmicks, and gurus, the snake oil that's all over the internet. And I would really search for some people that have succeeded at the highest level and figure out how they did it and try to repeat it.
Yeah, I agree. That's part of the reason why I started the podcast, so that I can learn from people, guys like you, who've been there and can bring, some light into what's going on.
Well, when you have enough information to be dangerous, that's not good. I mean, I don't, and I know that the internet's a great thing, and it really is. There's a lot of stuff out there. I mean, my website's out there, and it's something good to go to, and my YouTube channel and all of that for people to look at all my drills and all of that stuff. And all of them segue into a game. They transition right into a game. But, WebMD is a great resource, but you're not going to go to WebMD for everything. You're going to go to a real doctor. And I'm not saying we have the market, us being professional baseball players or retired or whatever, have the market on this stuff. There are some wonderful, wonderful amateur coaches out there. They really are. I had one at Clemson, but the fact of the matter is, if I want to learn how to fix a car, I'm going to go to a mechanic. I'm not going to Google it.
Yeah. Yep. So let's just last question here. If you were me and you were sitting here interviewing yourself right now, what question would you have asked yourself that I didn't ask?
Well, I think we already touched on some of it on why I did the website, why I created firmfoundationcatching.com. But I did it to share what I've learned from other people to help younger players. But I guess if you're asking something personal, I mean, it's why I do what I do, and it's not for glory for me. It's not for me to receive accolades. It's to help the next generation of baseball players, not only to become leaders on the field, but off the field as well, because we can only play this game for a short amount of time, but we're going to have an impact on future generations, not only on our own children, but our own community. And when we understand that all we are is baton passers to the next generation, not only baseball speaking, but also socially and everything else, then that's the crux of it. It's I'm not doing it for the dollar. I'm not doing it for notoriety. I'm doing it to see the next kid reach the highest level.